All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar, TEAs, What to Know in 2015. I'm Michael Kester, lead EB-5 Economist with Impact DataSource, and we're happy to have you here on this webinar. Just a little bit of background on why we're having this webinar now. This is the time of year where states are, majority of the states are changing over and doing their annual data update. This year they'll be changing from calendar year 13 to calendar year 14. So it's an interesting time of year. There's a lot of kind of data changes and some other interesting things that we want to kind of keep everyone apprised of. The point of this webinar is to not get into the weeds about census area calculation and things like that, but more just practical guidance, some things to think about to keep in the back of your mind as you're analyzing your EB-5 projects and potential locations going forward. Thanks to those of you who had submitted some questions beforehand. We're going to try to kind of sprinkle some questions throughout the presentation where relevant. We'll also have some time at the end for questions as well. However, if you do have a question that you would like to submit, just submit it through the questions box that you see in your webinar window. We'll try to get to it on this webinar, but if we don't and we're not able to get to it, we will respond to you as well if we're not able to cover that on today's webinar. The slides and the guidance today assume that the current TEA regulations are going to kind of stand in the near future and are going to remain. We know there's a lot of talk out there. It's kind of an interesting time for the EB-5 program, with the program set to sunset in September, and some talks about some legislation that's out there. But again, we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. So the majority of the slides today will kind of talk about how things are currently done. But we will have some slides at the end that will talk about what's out there as far as legislation and some current events that we'll discuss as well, just to keep you apprised of that. Just as a disclaimer, we're economists, and the advice and the guidance here is based on our significant experience with analyzing thousands of TEA sites and obtaining more than 100 TEA letters, and also our experience with working with multiple EB-5 attorneys and professionals, not only from the TEA work we've done, but the significant amount of economic job studies that we've performed ourselves, and also the ones that we've done due diligence reviews on. So we've kind of been through the ringer, so to speak, with this. So that's our guidance today, and our thoughts are reflective of that. But we're not attorneys. The presentation today is meant to help guide your conversations and to help ask the right questions to your EB-5 attorneys and other professionals. So just a little quick background about us, about Impact DataSource. We are an economic consulting firm founded in 1993, so we've been around a while, and we specialize in economic and fiscal impact analysis. And in the non-EB-5 world, we've done probably over 3,000 economic studies since 1993. And we got into EB-5 in 2010 as kind of the program gained in popularity. And it was just a natural transition for us because that was our bread and butter, our specialty, for 20 years has been economic and fiscal impact analysis. So it was a seamless transition into the EB-5 world for us. Our services on the non-EB-5 side, we do economic and fiscal impact analysis for local economic development deals, mainly that deal with incentives. And then in the EB-5 world, our focus is the job creation reports for regional center projects, and then of course a significant amount of targeted employment area analysis that we've done, and that's what the focus is on today. So just a little bit about us. In more specifics, we've done approximately more than 60 comprehensive EB-5 job studies for regional center projects, resulting in more than 20 regional center approvals and several other exemplar and I-526 approvals, along with the TEA work that we've done. Outside of our own work, we're involved. We're on IIUSA's EB-5 editorial committee, providing the economist perspective And then, as I mentioned before, we'd hope that you'd use us for your EB-5 economic job studies, but we also do due diligence reviews of other economists' work before submission to USCIS, where we analyze that and point out red flags and give our thoughts on that as part of the due diligence review. You may know us because of our free online map. We're excited to have that updated now, just as the states are updating to calendar year 14. We've also just recently released our new map, and we'll talk about that a little more as we go on. So let's kind of get into the presentation. So just, why are we here? Why are we talking about this? So why are TEAs important? Of course, they lower the minimum investment threshold from $1 million to $500,000. For those of you doing direct and regional center projects, while many other aspects of the differences of those types of projects are vastly different, the TEA regulations are the same related to direct and regional center projects. And as most of you know, the TEA-based projects are what's being marketed out there in the EB-5 market. So often the TEA question is my project in the TEA is often one of the very first questions that are asked before someone's thinking about taking the plunge down the EB-5 route for their project. On the recent EB-5 stakeholder call, there was a question on how many what percentage of projects are TEA projects, and the economists for USCIS responded they don't keep track of that data. Well, IIUSA was actually able to request some of that information. As you can see, in 2012 and 2013, approximately 98% of the projects were TEA projects. So that's what's being marketed out there in the EB-5 marketplace. So quickly, two types of TEAs. You can have qualify as a rural or a high unemployment TEA. Both change ongoing, but not at the same time frame or increments. We're going to talk about rural areas first because those are the most simple. They're more stable and long lasting. The key takeaway from this on rural TEAs is that nothing has changed in the last year, and nothing is planned to change for a long time. So if you have a location that currently qualifies as rural, then you can kind of rest easy that it's going to continue to be eligible as a rural TEA. You must meet two criteria. Again, we're not dealing with unemployment rates. We're dealing with location and population. The biggest one is it has to be outside of an MSA, metropolitan statistical area, as defined by the OMB. So if it's within an MSA, which the majority of EB-5 projects are, then unfortunately you have no chance of getting the rural criteria. If you're outside of an MSA, you have to go through another hurdle and actually be outside of a city or town with a population of 20,000 or more. You'll notice in the May 30th policy memo definition, it's an or in there, criteria 1 or criteria 2, but in reality, you need to hit both of them. So think of it as an and. So again, nothing really changing with rural areas. The two criteria, the first outside of an MSA, the second with the 20,000 resident population cutoff. Currently, we're dealing with the MSAs are updated infrequently. The most recent update came in 2013. We're not expecting another one until 2023. As far as the population for the 20,000 residents, and typo there, unfortunately, put another 0 at the end of that. For the 2010 census, again, it's based on the most recent decennial census, which the most recent is 2010. The next one not updated until 2020. So long story short, not expecting any changes to rural TEAs in the future. So how do we designate a rural TEA? The May 30th policy memo states there's no state involvement with rural TEAs as there is with high unemployment, as we'll get into. So we're not dealing with the state here. We just need to make sure that that location hits both of those criteria. And so it's kind of on you. It's on the application. The I-526 application should provide evidence to show that the project meets the two criteria. In our economic job studies that we perform for regional center projects, we usually just include a simple 1 or 2 page appendix that outlines, here's criteria 1, it hits, here's criteria 2, it works here as well, and source the data on that. So that's kind of it on rural areas. Not much of note to think about. So everyone is likely here more to talk about high unemployment areas. So this is where we're talking about dealing with the states and getting state involvement and the TEA letter, of course. So the key takeaway from this is that states can vary drastically on how they deal with TEAs, their methodologies, their data, how flexible they are, and we'll talk about that and some changes to be aware of. Again, determined by unemployment. In the simplest terms, the area must have 150% of the U.S. national average. Most states update annually, and that's why we're talking about it now. The 2013 to 2014 update just came through and is finalized. So we're looking at a decrease in the TEA threshold on a calendar year basis from 11.1. So the new one is now 9.3. So national rate's gone down, so our threshold has also gone down. And again, most states have recently updated, and the majority will also, if those that haven't updated, should be in the next month or so. So the question we get, a lot every year around this time of year is, the threshold went down, so we have a lower hurdle that we have to meet. So it must be easier to find TEAs, and it must be easier for this project location to be certified as a TEA. And it sounds like, on paper that might make sense, but however, that's not the case. There's so many moving pieces that are happening down when you're getting down to the census tract level and the local area unemployment that each state, each location, each project location needs to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis. There's a lot of moving parts, so it's possible that your site became harder, or it could have also become easier to meet TEA eligibility. So how can we designate a high unemployment area? So it can be a large area such as an MSA that qualifies on its own, or a county or a city. In practice, though, we typically have to get down to census tracts and combinations of census tracts. As with anything you do with EB-5 and USCIS, if you can keep it simple, please do. So if you have a project that is in a county or an MSA that qualifies, and that's beautiful. It should be very easy to get a state letter, and technically you can, for a county or an MSA, you can provide your own evidence in your I-526 application. However, you can usually get the state letter very easily, so I'd recommend just getting the letter anyway. It'll likely make your project easier to market, and you won't have an agent asking where the TEA letter is. You already have it on hand. So that's the simple way. However, in practice, we have to get down to dealing with census tracts, and then some states will also allow block groups. So this is where the state involvement is necessary. You must have a state letter from the TEA certifying agency within that state. And so one of the main questions is how creative and how flexible are states in designating TEAs? How can we combine census tracts to make something work? And USCIS has given flexibility to the states in determining the shape of the TEA or the boundaries of the TEA. So as with the methodology and the data that they use to calculate rates, they also differ on how flexible they are with census tract combination and things of that nature. So here's just a quick, really simplified example on what I'm talking about with census tract combination. The black star here indicates a project site. The census tract that is within is clear, so it does not qualify on its own as a high unemployment area. But you can see there's several high unemployment tracts surrounding it. So we can make a combined area to get above our needed threshold. And this is a very reasonable area that most states would consider certifying. We'll talk a little bit more on that later. In reality, this is a really simple, easy example. It's usually not that easy, unfortunately, but just to give you an idea. So again, here's from the May 30th policy memo about USCIS deferring to states on the boundaries. This issue, again, was on the most recent stakeholder call. Someone called in and asked a question about, is there anything that USCIS can do to kind of rein in Texas and Texas's TEA legislation, which is can be problematic because they've given authority down to the city level. Not going to get into the weeds on that. If you have any questions on Texas sites, please let us know. And USCIS simply responded, it's our policy that we defer to the states on the boundaries, and he kind of left it at that. So this is still a USCIS policy as of now, as reiterated on the recent stakeholder call. So while USCIS will defer on the boundaries, they will review the letter and the data to ensure that the methodology is correct, things are contiguous, and likely most importantly is that the letter is timely and the data utilized is timely. And we're going to get into that right now. So the timing of the TEA letter is extremely, extremely important. And why is that? Because the TEA letter matters when the investor comes on board. So the May 30th policy memo lists it as at the time of the investment. So the TEA doesn't really necessarily matter if you're filing an I-924 hypothetical or if you're filing an exemplar where there's no investor attached. It really comes into play when you have investors for your project and you're filing I-526s. So based on this, the question that we always get is, do TEA letters expire? And the answer is yes, they do, because they come into play at the time of the investment. So it depends on when that is happening. Again, along with timing of TEAs, USCIS does not provide great guidance on this issue. As I mentioned before, our guidance we're giving here is reflective of us going through the ringer on dealing with multiple TEAs and multiple projects and multiple EB-5 professionals in the industry. But there's not great, flat, hard line advice from USCIS or guidance on how long TEA letters last. So general guidance that we feel is the best and the safest is to consider, your TEA letter is no longer valid once there's new data that is available that could be used. So in other words, ask yourself the question, does my TEA letter, is it using the most recent data that the state is using? And so again, why we're having this webinar now is because states have just changed over their data or are in the process of changing over their data to calendar year 14. So again, I would recommend discussing any issues with your attorney if you have any questions or you think something might be borderline. There's a lot of kind of noise out there about TEA timing. We hear things like, well, the TEA letter is good from the date of the letter, and some states' letters will actually put that within their letter, but our advice is to focus on the data as opposed to the date of the letter or what the letter might say. So are you using the most recent data that's available based on what the state is doing? Using outdated letters will add a risk factor to your application. And quickly, a current letter, again, using what the state is using as the most recent 12-month period, which is now calendar year 14. So speaking to the risk factor that we talked about by using outdated letters, a recent stakeholder call last year specifically mentioned, on the USCIS stakeholder calls, you often don't get much good information. They don't really provide much, but this is something they specifically said very clearly was that one of the biggest issues they were seeing with I-526 applications is outdated old TEA letters. So something to keep in mind about the timing. So moving on, as we discussed, we have now updated our free TEA map. There's the link to that. We've also posted a video on our YouTube channel, just a quick how-to video with some tips and tricks on using the map. We'll go out there now and just bring it up. As you can see, for those of you who are used to our old map, there's a slightly different layout, basically the same info and layers and everything. The legend over here is a little bit different with some about details as well that are now visible. But the layout is basically the same. It's just been updated. So if I go to where we are at, Austin, Texas, you can see that the TEA eligible areas on their own will pop up in orange, and the ones that are not will remain clear. So basically kind of the same zoom in and out type of layout and functionality and things of that nature. I would suggest reading the About tab if you have time. Again, the map is meant for informational purposes to help kind of guide you. Each state, again, can do things differently and have different methodologies. So, use our map to point you in the right direction, but be sure to do, the full due diligence on the location, and we can certainly help you out with that. If you scroll further down, it talks about the data behind the map and what's going into the map. Again, if you want to go out and check out the how-to video, I think it'll be very, very useful. So now we're going to talk about some current events and just some things to kind of keep in mind and keep in the back of your mind as you're moving forward and analyzing sites this year. So again, new data has been released. There is something that we really want to point out to you if you happen to have projects in Massachusetts, Nevada, or New York. While most states are kind of moving everything forward a year on all the data that goes into a census share calculation, Massachusetts, Nevada, and New York are making the big change which California did last year. And this change involves, as part of the census share calculation, switching from 2000 census data to more recent American Community Survey data. And this can have potentially big swings at the tract and block group level. So again, this is something that California did last year, and it was such kind of a big deal that we wrote a blog about it. You can check it out on our blog. It's titled "Dude, Where's My TEA?" And if you really want to get into the weeds on it, I would suggest reading our blog. But in a sense, it can really change things at the census tract level. I don't mean to alarm anybody, just want you to be aware of that if you have projects in these states that you're looking at. All three states are pretty good to work with for TEAs and are pretty flexible. So, there's that to just keep in mind as well. But just wanted to point that out, that they are making this kind of big jump on one part of the data calculation at the census tract level. As a quick illustrative example on how this can change things, this is an example pulled from our blog that shows how much something can change at the tract level. This is from San Diego County. Again, this is from when California switched last year. So San Diego County is the dark bar here, and it shows over a 3-year period how the unemployment rate changed. So as we expect, the county level stayed pretty consistent, had a nice steady decline. Nothing weird to see there because there's no special census share calculations happening from California, the way California did things. However, if we start looking at these two census tracts, you'll see this top census tract, the way California did the calculation, the first year was 16.2. It kept the same methodology, went down just like the county at 14.4. And then when they made this switch from the 2014 to 2015 years, or 2013 to 2014, excuse me, it fell off a cliff. The census tract went from 14.4 to 2%. Now, it does not necessarily have to all be bad and make things harder. Some of the census tracts actually improved. So you can see this one stayed steady while they kept the methodology the same. And then when they made this switch, it jumped from 5.2 to 14.7. So these are the type of changes that at the census tract level that can happen for tracts in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada. As we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there's some new legislation and things that are kind of out there that we don't really know what is going to happen exactly, but we just want to make you aware of them, something to think about. The first is there's been some legislation, HR 616, that has been put forth that would have TEA letters be last for 2 years. Obviously, we talked about the TEA timing, and I think this is a direct result of the kind of uneasiness that some people have, or based on the current TEA regulations that people have about TEA letters expiring and becoming out of date and things of that nature. So if this went through, I'm not sure that it's going to, but if it did, it would be nice to have a little more security on TEA letters, having them be able to last for 2 years. We'll keep you posted on that if we hear anything on that. Also, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mr. Johnson sent a letter to Senator Grassley requesting a few things. Again, this is just for your knowledge. This is not saying these things are happening or going to happen. This is just something that's out there in the EB-5 world. The letter requested higher minimum investments for projects in a TEA, elimination of the TEA, the G word, gerrymandering, and then also in limiting TEAs to a certain number of contiguous census tracts. Again, just for your knowledge, who knows if anything would come of this. One thing to note, since California is such a hotbed of EB-5 activity, they have something posted on their website that says GoBiz is currently drafting new regulations for the state's TEA designation, et cetera, et cetera. So it looks like they're in the works on some new regulations. I spoke to the state, or I emailed with the state last week, and they indicated that the changes they're not planning they're not significant, and they will, give us some good lead time on what the changes might be. So it's not going to be just an overnight thing that they all of a sudden hit everybody with. You wake up one morning and they only allow 5 tracks instead of 12 or something like that. So we'll keep you posted on that, but I wouldn't expect anything significant coming out of that based on what California has said. So we try to answer some of the questions throughout this the webinar. Here are some other ones that we've been given. So just a little Q&A here. First question: can you help certify any area in the state as a TEA? And are there certain criteria you need to look at and evaluate? So again, each TEA, each location needs to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis. So not every area in a state likely can be made into a TEA, and some states are very flexible, so it's easier to find TEA areas, and some are not. So what we would need to evaluate that again is you can send us the project location, and then we kind of benchmark that against how does the state do things, and we take a look and evaluate and based on our knowledge of the state and their data and methodologies, and then we can give you our thoughts on if it might be TEA eligible. Is there a fast way to get a list of TEAs by state? Do certain states already have pre-designated TEAs? So kind of yes and no. A few state agencies will post some areas that are TEA eligible. These are typically the MSAs and the counties and census tracts that qualify on their own. Most states don't really provide much information on the website. And so as a fast way to get TEAs by state, it's basically impossible for a state to say, here's all the areas that might be TEA eligible, because they have the possibility of census tract combination. So there's so many different ways you can combine things that the states, they can't post something like that. But some states do post on their website some of the sites that qualify on their own without having to do any special combination. For USCIS to approve the TEA, is it sufficient to just send unemployment reports, or must there be supporting documents? So it kind of depends on what TEA you're dealing with. So with rural TEAs, as we said, you have to provide your own independent evidence because there is no state involvement. For high unemployment at the MSA or the county level, you could provide the relevant unemployment data straight from BLS. However, you might as well get the letter and just provide that, because usually it's very easy to get the letter if your site qualifies in one of those very large areas. At the census tract or potentially block group level, you should get the state letter and have that for your submission. That's the key item there. At what point in the EB-5 process is it safe to say that a project will not be impacted if its TEA status changes? So again, the TEA letter comes into play when the investor, becomes attached to the project, when the I-526 is submitted, or when the investment is made into the project. So if you have a TEA letter that's current and the state used proper methodologies at that time, the relevant timing for the investor, then you should be okay. Again, USCIS has the final say and will review everything. It's important to know that we get the question a lot that, within the same project, could one investor be okay and one investor not be okay, depending on the timing? And the answer to that is yes, because it's very investor specific. So especially with larger projects, multi-year projects where I-526s might be staggered, you have one investor coming on now and an investor coming down the road 6 months later. If the data changes over, there's the possibility that investor A is okay, but by the time investor B comes along, that TEA has fallen out of eligibility. So some things to think about there. What are the new rules that will take place this September? I wish we knew the answer to that, but we will keep you posted. How do we know if a TEA has sufficient unemployment to last through a 5-year period? I think there's a couple ways to look at this question. The first is the person who submitted the question might be thinking that the TEA needs to be good all the way through the I-829 stage when the investor is removing conditions. That's not the case. The TEA is relevant for the I-526 submission. So as long as it's okay at the I-526 and it's approved at the I-526 stage, then USCIS is not able to question that at the I-829 stage when the investor is removing conditions. Another way to look at this is if they're wondering, I'm not planning on submitting I-526s until a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road from now. How can I know that the TEA, if it's a TEA today, will it stay a TEA in the future? And the answer is, it's difficult to say. That's why if you're planning on filing I-526s for a project, more than a year from now or on down the road, it's good that your TEA might have some cushion. Sites that currently qualify but are somewhat borderline have a greater possibility of falling out of TEA eligibility in the future. How much do you charge? So typically we'll provide our initial thoughts on a site for no charge and just let you know a yes, it's a slam dunk, no, there's no way it's going to work, or maybe, depending on how the state might decide to look at this area. And then if you want us to move forward and help you get the letter, we basically just offer a full service where we basically do all the work, all the analysis, work with the state agencies, answer all their questions, and work as a liaison with them to do the whole process from start to finish to get the letter. It typically ranges from $750 to $1,500 per letter, depending on the states. Again, some states are very different and are more difficult to work with and require more analysis than others. So that's why we have that range there. So I'm going to look in and see if there's been any questions submitted during the webinar. And it looks like the first question, can you explain block groups and can your mapping go down to the block group level? Sure. So it's a really, really good question. So some states will allow to look at block groups. Now, basically, a block group is smaller than a census tract. In other words, each census tract is made up of one or two or three block groups. Some states, the majority of states, do not allow block groups, but the one that do, it provides much greater flexibility because the smaller the area you can get down and look at, the more flexibility you have to kind of piece things together to make a TEA. There are about 6 or 7 states right now that allow block groups. Our public map does not have block group layers on it, but we do analyze block groups when we get requests and on the projects we're working on, and we know which states allow block groups. So if you send us an address in a state that allows block groups, then if we can't get census tracts or another way to work, then we'll look at block groups and let you know that, look, the only way we can get this location to work is block groups, but that's okay because the state allows, permits block groups and will certify a block group area. Another question is, does your map have 2015 updates for California? And the answer to that is I'm almost 100% sure that yes, the current data in there matches what California's data is going to be. I was hoping that California was going to post their data on May 1st, like they said they were going to, but they have bumped it to sometime this week. And the last time I checked this morning, it was not updated as of yet. So the current map should either be very, very close to what California is going to use or exact, and we will keep an eye on that and let you know. I believe, based on what California has told me, the way they're going to update the data, that our map should be basically identical to what they're going to use, but we'll keep you posted on that. As soon as they post their data, which I'm eagerly anticipating will happen this week, we'll keep everyone posted on that. Question about Texas. Will Governor Abbott issue a new TEA designation letter? So again, for those of you who have not dealt with Texas, Texas is the only state that has given authority down to the city mayors and county judges. Every other state just has one statewide agency that does all the TEA designations. And the Texas TEA legislation there's been some benefits to it, but it's been pretty problematic as well. Because you start dealing with local authorities who have no idea what EB-5 is, and you have to bring them up to speed, and they don't really understand the ramifications of a TEA letter. So we've heard some rumblings that there might potentially be some changes, but as of kind of the other legislative changes, we kind of have no idea what might happen at this point. But we'll keep you posted as we hear anything. Let's see. Is there any other questions? I think that might be it. So there are some other specific questions, and if we didn't get to your question today, we will try to follow up with you, or please feel free to follow up with us. Here's kind of some more information on Impact DataSource as well. Again, we're starting a TEA video series, with the first video being the Impact DataSource TEA Map. That is now posted, with more videos to follow that will likely range from kind of the ABCs of TEAs for beginners, kind of new to the EB-5 industry, to more kind of advanced topics. There's some other links to, as I said, we'll take a look at the TEA location for you for free. Here's our link to the free TEA review site, link to our map, and some other good information, including a list of the states that certify TEAs, and a link to some of their websites. Here's my information if you would like to email me with any questions. Again, we'll try to follow up if we can on any questions we didn't get to today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope the webinar was useful to kind of help kind of guide you in the right direction on what to be on the lookout for TEAs in 2015. And as always, feel free to let us know if you have any questions on economic job studies or due diligence reviews, and of course on TEAs. Thank you very much.